邊個、邊度、乜嘢 These sort of things are not in Mandarin.
上星期分享咗 Part 1，而家就開始 Part 2啦。
For me, okay, the thing that makes it either easier or harder, there's two dimensions to this. One of the dimensions is that is it close to what you already know? All right, so if you're a French speaker and you're learning Italian, there's a lot of stuff that's close. All right, so you'll hear things and you'll know what they mean, even though the pronunciation is a little bit different. But because you already understand it, you're naturally doing comprehensible input, so you're understanding what you're hearing, and then you get to a point where you can start to say it, right? If it's like an English native speaker learning Mandarin, the sounds seem so different to start with that it's hard for people to even hear them. Cantonese, the same. But when I learned Cantonese, I was already speaking Mandarin, so it was actually easy, right? Because I already had Chinese structure. I already had the vocab. So it was really a matter of matching what I already knew to the sound differences that are in Cantonese. And then, of course, there's probably 100 words that are really, really daily Cantonese. Bingo, bindo. These sort of things are not in Mandarin. They're very, very high frequency, and you're not going to find them in Mandarin. They're a very different structure, but once you get past that 100 words or so, Cantonese is pretty much the same vocab as Mandarin, but just with different pronunciation. Listening first, listen till you can actually hear the language really, really clearly. Then you start to mimic the sounds. For Mandarin, you know, you go wa, ni, until you can really make the distinction. You know, na li, you know, you really stretch the mouth until you can say it. So you pick some really important basic things that you can start saying, and then you practice those until you get the sounds right. Right? You hold up chopsticks, right? 这个怎么说? Right, so you're practicing this phrase. How do you say this? Right, and you say it until it's absolutely clear and people understand you and you're comfortable with it, and then you go to the next thing. So if you work on 1 or 2 things a day, really demanding excellence from yourself to get as close as possible with the sounds, then in about 3 weeks you're going to have all of the sounds down, and you're going to have probably 100 words that are high frequency that you can use to communicate. Listen to people when they're angry. Their tones go flat. They're not really stressing the tones. Also, in China, different regions use the tones differently. Okay, so if you go to Sichuan, 他们会问你是哪的。All right, they will use very, very different tones to Beijing Mandarin, but you can still understand it. So in a language, you've got many different dimensions that convey the meaning. So it's highly redundant. All right, so tones is one. The choice of words is another. Right? Mm-hmm. The context is another, right? So you've got all these different signals all happening at the same time. So even if one signal is confusing, the others make up for the difference. So it's really not a big problem. Well, with any language, even with your mother tongue, you understand more than you will ever speak, right? So when you're learning a language, you will quite often understand 80% of what you're hearing, but you can only say 20%, right? It's the same as a child learning their mother tongue. The parents will be talking to them, the kids will be responding with their body, but if you ask the kid to say something, they maybe can only use 1 word, 2 words, right? Mm-hmm. And then as they get older, they get to say more words and put them together. And what's interesting when you're speaking a language is that the feeling of the language is tied up with your identity. Okay, so 如果我同你講廣東話，我成個人嘅感覺啦 说普通话的时候呢，那感觉是很不一样。Right, so I had a guy, French speaker, and he could speak English, but he had a really heavy French accent. And he came to me for help to improve his English accent. So we spent, I guess, an hour working together. So I led him through a process where he could actually say English like an English person. And then he looked at me and he said, "Oh, that feels terrible. I don't want to sound like this." What happened was that the feeling in his body, in his face, in his mouth was a very different feeling to speaking French. The French feeling is looser, more relaxed. The English feeling, especially like an Oxford accent, is really quite stiff in terms of the facial expression and the muscles and stuff like that. And he just didn't like that feeling, so he decided to keep his French accent. So same with Cantonese and Mandarin, right? You're going to actually feel different in the body when you speak one or the other, right? So you have to accept that you're going to feel different, and then you have to play with it. You need to enjoy it. You need to enjoy this process of speaking one or the other, and shifting, morphing between one identity and another identity. One is your Mandarin identity, one is your Cantonese identity. Like if I start speaking in Scots, already I'm speaking Scots accent, and my feeling's going to be a lot different than if I'm speaking to you in sort of normal English, right? So different languages actually have different personality clusters with them, and one of the reasons people find it hard to speak a second language is they're not prepared to take on a new personality cluster. They're trying to impose their old personality on the new language. It doesn't really work, right? So you need to expand your personality and be able to move between these different worlds, and that includes the sounds, the body feeling, the sort of way that you think about things.